2:47 in the morning. You are sound asleep, and your liver is running a night shift, manufacturing glucose and releasing it into your bloodstream hour after hour while your pancreas works overtime to contain it. At 6:30, you wake up. You prick your finger, or you look at your lab report from last week, and the fasting glucose number says 89. Your doctor calls it perfect. And for millions of active adults over 50, that word perfect is doing something dangerous. It is telling you the story is over when the story has barely started. Because a normal fasting glucose is not a photograph of your metabolism. It is the final score of a game you never got to watch. And it tells you nothing about how hard your body had to fight through the night to produce it. Consider the scale here. Researchers writing in the journal Recent Progress in Hormone Research put the number at roughly 19% of Americans over 65 already diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, nearly 1 in 5. And almost every one of them passed through a stage where their morning numbers still looked fine. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to show you what is actually happening in your body between 1 in the morning and 8 in the morning, why researchers documented this hidden pattern all the way back in 1984, why a theory your doctor may still repeat about nighttime blood sugar was largely dismantled when modern glucose monitors finally tested it. And one more thing. There is a single muscle below your knee that a 2022 study found can quietly regulate blood sugar for hours while you sit in a chair. Most people have never once used it on purpose. I will show you exactly how before this video ends. Here is precisely what you are getting today in order. First, the dawn phenomenon, the overnight mechanism documented in the journal Diabetes Care in 1984, and why it means a normal morning number can be purchased at a hidden and rising cost. Second, the overnight window when your liver becomes a sugar factory, and the research showing that in early metabolic trouble, that factory quietly increases production while you sleep. Third, the two specific tests that catch what a fasting glucose reading misses, and exactly how to ask your doctor for them at your next physical. Fourth, the 2024 randomized trial in Diabetes Care showing that losing about an hour and a half of sleep a night impaired insulin sensitivity even when body weight did not change at all. And fifth, the seated calf movement from the journal iScience that improved glucose and lipid regulation for hours, a movement you can do tonight in front of your television without standing up. Every one of those 5 gets delivered before we finish. I'm Dr. Vitalis. On this channel, I read the metabolic and aging research that never makes it into your 15-minute appointment, and I translate it into plain language for adults over 50 who want specifics, not slogans. If that mission matters to you, the like button and the subscribe button are the 2 fastest ways to help this reach the people who need it. That's the only ask. Now, let's get to work. Picture a man I'll call Frank. Frank is 68 years old. He lives outside Tucson, Arizona, and by any reasonable standard, Frank is doing everything right. He walks 4 miles every morning before the heat comes up. He gave up soda 11 years ago. He weighs 7 pounds less than he did at 55. And every year at his physical, his fasting glucose comes back somewhere between 88 and 94 milligrams per deciliter, squarely in the normal range. And every year his doctor spends about 9 seconds on it. Good number. Next topic. Frank walked out of those appointments feeling bulletproof, and he had every reason to. The number said so. Then, at this year's physical, a newer physician in the practice ordered something Frank had never been given before, a hemoglobin A1C, the test that reflects your average blood sugar over roughly the previous 3 months rather than a single fasted moment. Frank's fasting glucose that morning was 92, normal. His A1C came back at 6.2%, a value that falls into the range flagged as pre-diabetes under the testing criteria that bodies like the American Diabetes Association and the CDC publish.
Frank asked the obvious question, the one you might be asking right now.
How can my morning sugar be normal for 10 straight years while my 3-month average says I'm in trouble? He assumed one of the tests was wrong. He asked for a repeat. The repeat came back at 6.2. Neither test was wrong. They were measuring 2 different things, and the gap between them is the entire subject of this video. The fasting glucose measured 1 instant, the finish line at dawn, after Frank's body had spent the whole night doing whatever it took to land the number there. The A1C measured everything, including the hours Frank never sees, the hours between roughly 1 and 8 in the morning when his glucose was drifting higher than anyone knew, night after night, month after month, quietly dragging the average up while the morning snapshot stayed clean. Frank's numbers weren't contradicting each other. One of them was simply telling the truth about a part of the day the other one couldn't see. Now, Frank is a composite, a pattern assembled from many stories rather than one man's chart.
But the pattern itself is not fiction. And if you are over 50, active, and relying on a fasting number to tell you your metabolism is fine, the hours Frank couldn't see are the same hours you can't see.
So let's turn the lights on. Here's the part they skip. In 1984, researchers published a study in the journal Diabetes Care documenting something remarkable in people who did not have diabetes. In the early morning hours, their insulin levels rose. Not their glucose, their insulin. The glucose stayed stable, normal, flat. But underneath that flat line, the pancreas was ramping up its output specifically to hold the line. The researchers were describing what came to be called the dawn phenomenon. And I want you to sit with what it actually means, because it is the key to this entire puzzle. It means a normal morning glucose is not free. It is bought. Every single night, your body pays for that number with insulin, and in a healthy 40-year-old, the price is low. The pancreas ramps up, the tissues respond, glucose holds steady. Nobody notices. The transaction is invisible.
But invisible is not the same as cheap, and with age, the price starts climbing. 2 things climb it. The first is the supply side of the equation. A 2022 review in Frontiers in Endocrinology laid out how pancreatic beta cells, the cells that manufacture your insulin, decline in both mass and function as we age. Fewer factories, running less efficiently. The machine that pays for your flat morning number gets older every year, exactly like every other machine you own. The second is the demand side. And this one happens in your liver. Your liver does not shut down when you sleep. It manufactures glucose all night through a process called gluconeogenesis, literally the creation of new sugar, to keep your brain fueled through the fast. That's normal. That's survival. But a 1997 study in the journal Diabetes found that in people in the early stages of type 2 diabetes, overnight glucose production and gluconeogenesis were measurably increased. The night factory doesn't stay at its old output. It escalates. And here is the detail that should genuinely change how you think about this. A 1996 study, also in the journal Diabetes, showed in animal research that the liver could ramp up glucose production during low blood sugar even when the classic counter-regulatory stress hormones, glucagon, epinephrine, cortisol, were taken out of the picture. The liver initiated the increase itself. This is not a system waiting politely for headquarters to send orders. This is a factory with its own thermostat. And as metabolic health erodes, that thermostat drifts upward on its own. So put the two curves together. Overnight demand rising because the liver is producing more sugar in the dark. Overnight supply straining because the aging pancreas is producing insulin with less capacity every year. For years, maybe a decade, those two curves fight each other to a draw. And the draw is what you see at 6:30 in the morning, a fasting glucose of 92. A doctor saying, "Good number, next topic." The number is real. It is also the output of a system running closer and closer to its limit. And the fasting test has no way to show you the strain, only the result. That was Frank's 89, not a sign of peace. The scoreboard of an escalating war that happened to end in a tie again last night. Now let me show you three more people, because this pattern does not wear one face. The first is a woman I'll call Marlene, 71 years old, Dayton, Ohio, retired school teacher, water aerobics 3 mornings a week. Marlene's fasting numbers weren't flat like Frank's. Hers were creeping. 95 one year, 99 the next, then 104. And when she raised it, she was offered an explanation you may have heard yourself. Her sugar was probably dropping too low overnight, and her body was rebounding, overcorrecting, producing the high morning readings. That explanation has a name, the Somogyi effect, and it has been repeated in exam rooms for the better part of a century. A 2025 paper in the journal Hormones traced the whole history of Michael Somogyi's hypothesis and noted something important, that whether the phenomenon is even real or clinically relevant is now openly debated. And the debate has data behind it. Remember the open loop from the beginning of this video? The theory that fell apart when modern monitors finally tested it? This is it. A 2013 study in diabetic medicine put continuous glucose monitors on people, watched their actual overnight readings, and found that the evidence largely fails to support the idea that nighttime lows are what cause high fasting numbers. When researchers could finally see the whole night instead of guessing at it, most of those rising morning readings weren't rebounds from a crash. They were the end point of a slow, steady overnight climb, exactly the dawn phenomenon mechanics we just walked through. For someone like Marlene, that distinction is everything, because the two explanations point in opposite directions. One says her body is overcorrecting from lows. The other says her overnight production and her insulin response are drifting apart. Same morning number, completely different problem, completely different conversation with her doctor. The second face belongs to a man I'll call Walter. 63, Spokane, Washington, retired firefighter, and physically, Walter would embarrass men 20 years younger. He lifts weights 3 days a week. His diet is disciplined. But Walter sleeps 5.5 hours a night, and has for 30 years, a habit he wears like a badge from his firehouse days. Here is why that badge should worry him. A 2024 randomized trial published in Diabetes Care took women with healthy sleep habits and restricted their sleep modestly, about an hour and a half a night, for weeks. Not all-nighters, just chronically shortened nights, the kind millions of people call normal. Insulin sensitivity got measurably worse, and here is the finding that removes every excuse. It got worse independent of any change in body fat. The participants did not gain weight and get sicker. The short sleep itself degraded how their bodies responded to insulin. Now, that trial studied women, so I won't pretend it proves the identical result in a 63-year-old man. But it demonstrates something that applies to Walter's whole way of thinking. He believes exercise and diet are the two levers, and that he's pulling both. The research says there is a third lever, and a man can be strong as a horse while quietly leaving it untouched. Every single night. The third face is the one that surprises people. A woman I'll call Diane, 59, lean, her entire life, walks half marathons for fun, and carries exactly one risk factor: a mother who developed type 2 diabetes at 70. Diane assumed her fitness was a wall between her and her mother's diagnosis. It is closer to a discount than a wall. Remember the supply side of the equation, the 2022 Frontiers in Endocrinology review on beta cells declining in mass and function with age? That decline does not check your marathon medals. Staying lean and active genuinely lowers the demand on the system, and that matters enormously. But the aging of the insulin supply is happening on its own clock, and family history suggests Diane's clock may run faster than average. This is how a slim, active 59-year-old ends up in the same overnight arithmetic as Frank and Marlene and Walter. And it is why that figure from earlier, nearly 1 in 5 Americans over 65 with diagnosed type 2 diabetes, includes plenty of people who did most things right. Fitness buys you time and margin. For many people, it does not buy exemption. 3 different bodies, 3 different stories, 1 shared blind spot. The 7 hours nobody was watching. So now the question that actually matters. What do you do about a problem your standard test can't see? Here is exactly what to do in order. Number 1. At your next physical, ask for a hemoglobin A1C alongside your fasting glucose, and if you're over 50, I'd argue you should never again accept a fasting number alone as the full verdict. The A1C reflects your average glucose across roughly 3 months, which means it captures the nights, all 90 of them, the exact territory the fasting test is blind to. This is the test that caught Frank. Both the American Diabetes Association and the CDC describe it among the standard tools for identifying diabetes and prediabetes. So this is not an exotic request. It is a one-sentence ask. Say this: I'd like an A1C with my labs this year. I want the 3-month picture, not just the morning snapshot. Your doctor decides what's appropriate for you, but in most cases, this is a routine addition to blood work you were already getting. Number 2. If your numbers come back borderline, or if your fasting glucose and your A1C seem to disagree the way Frank's did, ask your doctor whether an oral glucose tolerance test makes sense for you. This is the test where you drink a measured glucose solution and your blood is checked over the following 2 hours, and its entire purpose is to watch your system under load rather than at rest. A fasting test asks how things look after 8 quiet hours. A tolerance test asks what happens when demand actually arrives. And a system that is straining can pass the first while failing the second. It is listed among the standard diagnostic tests by the American Diabetes Association. It takes a morning. When the 2 simpler numbers are telling different stories, it is often the tiebreaker. Number 3. Audit your sleep window this week and treat it as metabolic policy, not lifestyle preference. That 2024 diabetes care trial matters here for one reason above all. The harm from chronically shortened sleep showed up without any weight gain, which means your bathroom scale cannot reassure you about this. Count backward from your wake time and protect a window of at least 7 hours in bed consistently starting tonight. If you're a 5.5-hour sleeper like Walter, don't try to leap to 7.5 at once. Move your bedtime 15 minutes earlier for a week, then 15 more. And if you snore heavily or wake gasping, or your spouse says you stop breathing at night, tell your doctor that directly, because unexamined sleep problems and metabolic problems tend to travel together. And no amount of daytime exercise pays that debt. Number 4. Learn the soleus push-up, the payoff of the open loop I planted at the very start. The soleus is a deep muscle in your calf, below the knee, and it is metabolically unusual. In 2022, researchers published a study in the journal iScience showing that when this one muscle was worked in a specific seated way, it sustained a high level of oxidative metabolism for hours, not minutes, hours. And glucose and lipid regulation measurably improved. Here is the entire technique. Sit in a chair, feet flat on the floor. Keeping the front of your foot, your toes, and the ball of your foot planted on the ground, raise your heel as high as it will go. Then, let it fall back down. That's 1 repetition. No weight, no strain, no equipment. And because the soleus is built for endurance, you can continue for a very long time without exhaustion. Which is precisely the point. Do it while you watch television, while you read, while you sit through a phone call. To be clear about what this is and isn't, it is not a replacement for your morning walk, and it will not undo a poor diet. It is a way to keep a glucose-hungry muscle switched on during the sitting hours that would otherwise be metabolically dead, and for people who spend evenings in a chair, which is most of us. Those hours add up to a real target. Number 5, establish a testing cadence and keep your own records, because a single number is a snapshot, and the trend is the story. Ask for your actual values every year. Write them down, fasting glucose and A1C side by side, and compare year over year. A fasting glucose that drifts from 88 to 96 over 5 years is still normal on every individual lab report. And it is also a trend line pointing somewhere. The NIH and the CDC both maintain plain language reference material on blood glucose, prediabetes, and testing through Medline Plus and the CDC's own pages, so you can read the definitions yourself instead of relying on 9 seconds of appointment time. You are allowed to be the historian of your own numbers. In this arena, the historian usually wins. Before we close, one advanced move for those who want to actually see their nights instead of inferring them. Ask your doctor whether wearing a continuous glucose monitor for 10 to 14 days makes sense in your situation. This is the same class of technology that researchers used in that 2013 diabetic medicine study to finally test the Somoji theory against reality, a small sensor, usually worn on the arm, that records your glucose around the clock, including every hour you're asleep. 2 weeks of that data can show you your own overnight curve, whether it holds flat, whether it climbs toward dawn, what your dinner choices do to it. Now, the caveats, and they matter.
This is not for everyone. Availability and coverage vary, and a single strange reading on a single night means very little. These devices earn their value in patterns, not moments. Do not diagnose yourself off a sensor graph, and do not let one midnight spike frighten you. Bring the data to your physician and interpret it together. Used that way, it is the closest thing that exists to turning the lights on. In the room this entire video has been about. Let me leave you with the one idea I most want to survive the next week. A normal fasting glucose is an achievement, not a guarantee. It tells you your body succeeded again last night. It does not tell you what the success cost. And in an aging metabolism, with a liver that raises its overnight output and a pancreas working with fewer older beta cells, that cost can rise for years behind a perfectly clean morning number. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans over 65 carries a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, and the road there almost always runs through a long stretch where the fasting number still said fine. You now know what that number can't see. You know the 2 tests that can. You know the sleep lever, and you know the muscle below your knee. That is more than most people learn before the diagnosis instead of after. One thing I need you to hear plainly. Everything in this video is educational. Frank, Marlene, Walter, and Diane are composites built to illustrate published patterns, and nothing here is medical advice or a diagnosis. Your situation is specific, so take these questions to your own physician and make decisions together. If someone you care about is over 50 and proudly tracking a fasting number, a spouse, a brother, a friend from your walking group, send them this video, because the people most at risk here are precisely the ones being told everything looks perfect. And if today changed how you'll read your next lab report, subscribe and tap the like button so this reaches the next person who needs it. I'm Dr. Vitalis, and I will see you in the next